Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the 22nd Annual Hempfest, the 22-carat Seattle Hempfest Protestival. Appreciate you all coming out. We had to pull some serious strings to get that rain to blow away and get this sunny weather. But whatever we can do to make it a more pleasurable experience, we're going to try to pull off. We have a cadre of luminaries in the cannabis policy reform field here to speak to you, for you after I give you a brief introduction. Appreciate everybody coming out for this. When we started Hempfest in 1991, a lot of people thought that we were basically jousting at windmills, that it was never going to happen. We heard words like it's a pipe dream, you're pissing in the wind, prohibition's here to stay. What we've seen with the historic passage of I-502 and Measure 64 in Colorado is that change is definitely in the wind. The meme that prohibition's an iron curtain is here to stay is impenetrable, has been shattered and replaced with what looks like prohibition's a brick wall, and we've taken a few bricks strategically out. We take the next couple bricks out and you never know, we might compromise the structural integrity and the whole thing might come crashing down. We're doing something a little different this year. We're having 3 themes rather than one annual theme. We're going to have a different theme every day. Today's theme is the end game, no federal schedule. Tomorrow, Saturday's theme is harm reduction. What about the children? And on Sunday, voter power, your vote in democracy. And I want to touch very briefly on all 3 of these. You know, alcohol and tobacco are very dangerous drugs. Tobacco kills more people annually than murder, suicide, car accidents, drug overdoses combined. Alcohol is the 3rd leading cause of lifestyle-related death in the United States. But both of these dangerous, addictive drugs are exempted from the federal schedule entirely. Yet marijuana really remains a #1 controlled substance, as bad as it gets. And the criteria for that is that it has no medical value and is highly addictive. So, you know, we think it's time to take marijuana completely off the federal schedule entirely, like alcohol and tobacco. That's pretty much the end game. As long as marijuana is a Control 1 federal substance, marijuana is not legal in any of the 50 states on a federal level. And anybody can go to jail or prison at any time for marijuana. And as you all know, federal sentences are much worse than state or local sentences. On Saturday for the main stage in the 3 to 4 o'clock area, we intend to do an Occupy Wall Street style call and response communication method to send a message to President Obama from his personal chum gang here that it's time to remove marijuana from the federal schedule entirely. Tomorrow's theme, harm reduction. We've worked with Dr. Roger Rothman of the University School of Social Work to develop 8 cards with 8 harm reduction messages on them. They'll be available at the information booths. They deal with subjects like marijuana in your lungs, marijuana dependency, marijuana in driving. They're basically geared towards youth, but they apply to everybody. We believe that now that marijuana is decriminalized in Washington State and Colorado, it's time to start messaging a little more aggressively to young people so they understand that our message is that very young people should wait until they're emotionally, physically, and mentally developed before they experiment with marijuana or any illicit drug or even any above-the-counter substance which might be mood-altering. And Sunday's theme, voter power, your vote in democracy, pretty much speaks for itself. You know, a lot of people tell me, why do you vote? We're just encouraging the system. It's a waste of time. It's all rigged. And how anybody could see that now we have legal gay marriage, a black president in the White House, and an ounce of marijuana legal in Washington. I don't see how anybody could say that your vote is not extremely powerful. And if you do not vote, then your political free speech is basically being ignored, and your message is being ignored. Our voter registration crew, our volunteer voter registration crew here in Hempfest registered 1,800 new voters, Washington State voters last year. We're very proud of that. There's been some very large elections that have been determined by less than 1,800 people. But we're not going to be happy until we can register 18,000 people to vote. So we're going to be trying to do that this year. On that note, we do have both Mayor McGinn speaking tomorrow and Senator Ed Murray speaking today from the main stage. We're also proud to announce that Alaskan Senator Mike Gravel will be speaking on Saturday at the main stage as well. I don't want to take any more of the esteemed guest speakers that we have. They're about to address these subjects for you. So basically I'm going to hand this over to Kari Boiter and let her take the mic. Thank you so much, Kari, for putting this together.
Thank you, Vivian. So I was invited here to speak to you about the war on drugs and explain why our work is not over yet. Obviously, we all know that marijuana is a Schedule I controlled substance, and that means that state law is completely irrelevant in federal court. You don't get to talk about it. So right now here in Washington, there are entire families who are facing indictment for medical marijuana. These aren't people who were trying to get rich quick. They weren't growing hundreds of plants. These are legitimate patients who are seriously ill. I know of at least 3 cases right now that are active in our state. One of them is for just 44 plants. And there's another guy who is being threatened with prison right now for 15 plants in our state where it's been declared legal. And despite the fact that voters have overwhelmingly approved recreational marijuana, U.S. attorneys are aggressively pursuing patients here. And while the state of Washington finalizes plans to manufacture and distribute cannabis commercially, people like Jerry Laberty are in prison for doing the exact same thing. Jerry's on this poster behind me. He owned a legitimate state-licensed dispensary in Spokane, provided medicine to the sick, and he's now in prison for doing so. And behind Jerry in this poster is Chris Williams. And Chris went into business with a criminal defense attorney and the lobbyist who wrote the medical marijuana law. He thought for sure that this would mean he was in clear and unambiguous compliance, like President Obama and Eric Holder had talked about. But it wasn't until Chris went on trial in federal court that he understood how the system really works. You see, they use your banking records to prove that you were laundering money. And they use your utility bills to prove that you were manufacturing drugs. They use business contracts, and they proved that Chris was conspiring to distribute marijuana with those business contracts. And so as a result, he was convicted, and he faced a 90-year mandatory minimum for a state-licensed caregiving company. Life in prison for a crime with no victims. And Chris's story pales in comparison to Richard Flor. Richard's last moments on earth were spent shackled to a hospital bed. He died from medical neglect 4 months into his federal prison sentence. He was the first registered caregiver in the state of Montana. And his widow Sherry remains behind bars. She's unable to grieve the loss of her husband from prison. And she was recently asked by her prison counselor to write down 5 negative things in her life. I've included those in your media packet to read about what the most negative things are for Sherry Flor, and it's not prison. So why is it that Sherry and Chris and Jerry are rotting in prison while businesses right up the street get to advertise $200 ounces and sell them with no problem? And how can the state of Washington legally issue licenses to produce and process and distribute marijuana when the federal government considers it illegal? The message is really clear to me. They can sell drugs. The government can regulate drugs, they can control it, and they can do a better job than the cartels. But you and me, as common folks, we can't. If we grow marijuana, we go to prison. And they use our friends, even the lawyers that advise us, and they take their testimony and they use it to seal our fate. So Eric Holder's plan to get smart on crime, it doesn't talk about rolling back the system of informants that rewards treachery and punishes those with little or no information to trade. He didn't have anything to say about the hardworking Americans who are having their property seized without ever having a single criminal charge filed. He didn't talk about the DEA's Special Ops program. And when he was speaking in California, not once did he mention hundreds of prisoners who are now on day 40 of a hunger strike to protest inhumane conditions. There's a lot of things that Holder left unsaid. And what was most clear to me was he didn't talk about marijuana. He applauded states for leading the way on ending mass incarceration, but there was no mention about us leading the way when it comes to decriminalizing cannabis. So while Dr. Sanjay Gupta apologizes publicly for misleading the public on this topic, our country's Attorney General has nothing to say about something that half the country agrees on. If Holder's serious, he can start by respecting the medical marijuana laws in 20 different states and the District of Columbia. And if he wants sweeping change, he can remove cannabis from the Controlled Substances Act. If these leaders really want to slash the $83 billion budget for imprisonment in this country, they can start by demanding the immediate release of every prisoner who's being held for a cannabis crime. We could put hundreds of children through school with the money that we're going to spend to incarcerate the 16 medical marijuana providers on this banner. Hundreds of kids we could educate. Ignorance is not bliss. We can't wish away this problem, and ignoring the conflict doesn't make it any less real. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Douglas Hiatt, who can explain more about some of the legal minefields that come with trying to regulate an illegal substance.
Good morning. How you guys doing? Everybody doing all right? I'm sure we're all happy. We heard from our Attorney General this week about this new smart on crime policy. Why do I feel like I've heard that before? Because I have. More window dressing from an administration with which I am thoroughly disenchanted at this point over a number of issues, but none more so than their failure to honestly address the war on drugs and the current issues surrounding marijuana decriminalization. I've only got a couple minutes here, and I really want to highlight what today's Hempfest theme is, which is end federal scheduling, or a federal solution to our problem, because make no mistake, that's what we need. We need a federal solution. We must have a federal solution. Without a federal solution, there is no meaningful reform, period. So we have got to get a federal solution. We got to get it in place. One of the ways we could do that would be to have the federal government, the administration, deschedule marijuana. Take it out of Schedule 1. Everybody knows it's bullshit, it's in Schedule 1. There are 4,000 peer-reviewed papers written by doctors all over the world. There's 5,000 years of history in the Chinese pharmacopoeia. We've studied marijuana long enough. We know a lot of things about it. We need to know a lot more. So let's lift the research ban, get rid of the scheduling, and get going. That would be one solution, but since we're into the second administration, and this is when all the change is supposed to be happening that they couldn't do in the first administration because they were afraid they weren't going to get reelected and all that shit, well, you know, now's the time to push on some of these things. And if they're really going to put their money where their mouth is, now's the time to force them to do it. So we push for descheduling. We also push and we try to get guys like Dana Rohrabacher and Sam Brownback's Truth in Trial Act. We need to get in touch with Patty Murray and Maria Cantwell. Where are they? Where are they? Why aren't they helping us? That's our federal link. Those are our senators. They need to be educated on this. They need to hear from you. Because without a federal solution, nothing's gonna work. We've got a situation in this state that's as absurd as any in the country, because we have Eastern Washington, where you have Michael Ormsby, U.S. Attorney, and then we have Western Washington, where you have Jenny Durkin, U.S. Attorney. Justice should not matter. It shouldn't turn on where you live if you're going to experience justice, but believe me, in this state it does. There's a guy in Spokane, Kari alluded to, he's looking at federal prison because he's been charged in federal court for 15 plants. I don't know how much more clear and unambiguous you can get in terms of being in compliance, but they don't care. They're proving a point. They've got people from Yakima, Spokane, Okanagan, Stevens County, everywhere. These people are under attack by the federal government. They're not safe because the U.S. Attorney on that side of the mountains will file the stuff. It's discretion, but it results in an equal protection violation. You're safe over here, you're not safe over there. How are they going to solve that problem? You know, vis-a-vis 502, they want to have big grows in Eastern Washington. Take this lawyer's advice. Let it sit for a couple years. Don't rush over there and plant 50,000 plants, okay? Because it ain't going to work. That's the problem. The federal government, their law reigns supreme according to the Constitution. They can make it stick. They have the ability to wipe out 502. The organizers, the people that got it passed admit that. The federal government can do that. It can also just come in and pick people off little by little. What really needs to happen here is what Vivian said at the beginning. We need to get enough bricks out of this wall to make that motherfucker fall down. And the way that we do that is we put the pressure on him politically. We got him on the run. The truth is out there. It's loose. It's a dangerous thing, and they know that. So they want to keep lying. They want to drag up old stuff. They want to try and paint everybody as gangsters. They want to divide the movement and have people say, oh, those guys must be doing something wrong. They got busted. Bullshit. You don't have to do anything wrong to get busted. They can bust you anytime they want. Everything remains illegal. There was no legalization. There is no legalization. Not true legalization. It's not there. We're not there yet. You can still be busted at any moment. They don't need an excuse to do it. And that is the reason why our work hasn't even begun on a serious level to get real reform going. It hasn't even begun. We got to double up and fight twice as hard as we ever fought before if we want to get this done now. Because now they can say, oh, we already did it. We already got that done. Well, we didn't get it done. And we got to do it now. And you guys are the ones that do it. You guys are always the ones that do it. Not the people up here talking and not the people on the news and all that crap. You guys. You guys are the ones that call your senators, call your congressmen, put the heat on, get them at the ballot box, make them accountable, make them explain why Richard Floyd died in prison, make them explain, hey, Patty Murray, what's up with Chris Williams? Yo, he's down in Sheridan doing 5 years. What's up with that? For following the law. We need to ask these people some questions, we need to speak some truth to power, and we need to get some goddamn meaningful answers.
Ask them, fight back.
Right on.
Yeah.
Let's do it. I gotta run. I'm gonna be around. I'd be happy to talk to anybody that wants to talk about this stuff. I hope that everybody realizes, you know, the old saying, no one can do everything, everyone can do something. It's really true. So pick up that goddamn phone and give Patty Murray a call, will ya? Thank you.
So now we have Mr. Steve DeAngelo. He is the executive director of Harborside Health Center in Oakland, and he's actually fighting the federal government right now. He's one of these people that we've been talking about who's literally putting his life on the line, his freedom on the line, to stand up for what all of us believe in. And he's going to talk about how he's trying to keep his property from being seized by the federal government and also work to reform the 280E tax laws that keep businesses from deducting legitimate tax expenses.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much. It's great to be here at this Hempfest of all Hempfests. Yes. We do, of course, still have a long way to go, but we need to remember how far we have come. Let's remember that. I first came to this event in 1992. Long before many of the people who will be here today were even gleams in their parents' eyes. I came here with my dear friend and mentor, Jack Herrer. Jack's here today. He's right here on my shoulder. He's got a great big smile and he's blowing a great big joint. Do you see him? He's right here with us today. Thank you, Jack. He didn't get here, but he knew we would get here. Jack and hundreds and really thousands of other activists like him. We have come a long way. And as we're here today, moving from protest to celebration, it's a special time. There's still a lot of work in front of us, no doubt. Now that we have been entrusted by the voters, we need to prove that we are worthy of that trust. There's still a huge amount of stigma and shame and ignorance that surrounds this plant. It's now our job to start reintroducing cannabis to the rest of our community, to the rest of our fellow citizens who have been affected by that ignorance. It's time to start providing an example of a responsible, legally compliant cannabis industry that probably is the most single effective thing that we're going to be able to do to get the work done everywhere else. Of course, Washington is just a beginning. We still have 48 states to go in this country and many other nations around the world. The eyes of the whole world will be on us, will be on Washington to see how this law unfolds, to see whether it provides a benefit not to just to people who use cannabis, not just to people who rely on cannabis for medicine, but a benefit to the entire community. And that's our task now, is to create a legal cannabis industry, a legal cannabis community that does return benefits to the entire community. That's the single most potent thing that we can do to help our brothers and sisters who are in prison, to help all the people who are suffering without medicine, people who are dying, and all of their families, and everybody else who's still affected by this war. We, of course, at Harborside have been fighting pretty vigorously for the last few years. The government's been trying to do everything that they possibly can to close us down that doesn't involve putting us in front of a jury, because they know they would lose if they did that. So they gave us a huge back tax bill. They have denied us bank accounts at the same time that they've been sending IRS agents in to audit us and demanding complete financial records. We've had our bank accounts closed by about 6 different banks because of pressure from the Treasury Department. And their latest trick was to try and seize the properties that we are located in, that we do business in. But they didn't really do their homework when they decided to target Harborside. They didn't know our track record. They didn't know that we have an incredible, determined, and brilliant attorney named Henry Wykowski, who was not going to let that happen. Are you here, Henry? I guess Henry's not here. But Henry has scored amazing victories over the course of the last couple years, both in state court and in federal court. And the upshot of those victories is that all of the federal attempts to close us down, short of putting us on trial, have failed. We have fought them into a corner. We've backed them up to a standstill. Harborside is going to be around a long, long, long time after Melinda Haig and the other drug warriors are history. So thank you all for coming today. Thank you all for the part that you've played in moving this movement forward. Thank especially the organizers of Hempfest, this incredible organization of hundreds of people. What incredible work they do. You know, I go to events, dozens of events every year, many of them cannabis events, some of them not cannabis events. I've never been to one that was as tightly organized, as smoothly executed, and carried the kind of intention and sensitivity and compassion and beauty that this one does. Thank you all for making this for us.
So Steve mentioned Henry Wykowski. He's one of about 120 speakers that we have, who are all amazing in their own right. We obviously didn't want to put them all up here in front of you, but there is some information on the table in the back where you can learn more about all of our speakers. And of course, if you want to get in touch with any of them, feel free to contact us and we will put you in touch for interviews if you're interested in that. So now we have Adam Eidinger. He is a public affairs director for Dr. Bronner's Magic Soaps, and Dr. Bronner's has been an amazing partner in this movement, helping to fund many of the projects that we need to get prisoners home. Washington, D.C., a hemp store, and he had to go through his own battle with the federal government over that hemp store. So he's here now to talk about that, as well as some of the federal restrictions that keep us from being able to talk about the agricultural commodity that is hemp.
Thank you. First, I think there was a request for Patty Murray's phone number. It's 206-553-5545. If you want to call, you call her right now if you feel hot under the collar. So everybody know about a group called Vote Hemp. This is a group that's been working since 2000 to re-commercialize industrial hemp in the United States. And I was working for Dr. Bronner's, but also volunteering as the communications director for Vote Hemp for many years. And we had to fight just to preserve the hemp food market in the United States. A lot of people don't realize that in 2001, right after September 11th, the federal government tried to ban hemp foods and hemp cosmetics, which would have banned our soaps. How ridiculous is this? You know, this is omega-3 rich oil that can be used on a lot of different products, and it was being banned supposedly because it was a drug, and it wasn't. It was not scientifically based. Dr. Bronner's and the Hemp Industry Association worked and it really came together and sued the federal government. We won, and we beat the DEA in 2004, and ever since there's been an explosion of hemp food products in the marketplace, and now hemp food is probably the largest part of the hemp economy, although you have other industries like fiber and insulated concrete. These are all really great things. In 2007, I was given permission to sort of take some time away from Dr. Bronner's to open up a hemp store in the nation's capital, because there was no hemp store in the nation's capital. There were no head shops in the nation's capital, and this was a place that is not cannabis friendly. So we felt like we were taking a risk just opening a hemp store. Well, we were open for almost 5 years before we were raided and closed for sale of drug paraphernalia. We were not actually convicted of anything. We were strong-armed and forced out of business. We only sold pipes to people who expressed they were for tobacco use. If you came in and said you were going to use it for medical marijuana, we would not sell it to you. We had to be that way just to keep this thing open. But despite all that, it was the cultural center of the cannabis community for a number of years. There was no other place like it, and if you wanted to find out what was going on with maybe the medical initiative that we passed in 1998 is going to be finally implemented, well, that discussion was taking place in this store. The police didn't like it, of course, they targeted it, and they put us out of business. I want to point out a couple things. The federal government is totally out of step with the people of this country at this point. And we know it, and all the cannabis consumers around the world know it. But do people in Washington, D.C. know it? The actual people who live there. There's 600,000 of us who are residents of the nation's capital. We don't have senators, and we don't have a congressman. We have a non-voting delegate in Congress. Eleanor Holmes Norton is her name. And meanwhile, we have the highest per capita arrest rate for marijuana in the world. Not just America, but in the world. People focused on New York a couple years ago. D.C. is worse. And this is a majority black city. Majority minority city. No coincidence there. Can anyone guess what the arrest rate is? Annually, your chances of being arrested for marijuana in D.C. are greater than 1 in 100. That's 1 out of every 100 people every year is arrested for marijuana in the city. Last year alone, combined total from all agencies, over 7,000 marijuana arrests in the city. These are for simple possession. These are small possession amounts. So, while on one hand I started this discussion, started my presentation with hemp, I want to point out that hemp is illegal because of the marijuana laws, and until scheduling is changed, hemp will not really be commercially viable in this country. We do have hemp farming now in Colorado that's taking place, and there's some hemp farming happening in other states, sort of secretly, and these are non-drug varieties of industrial hemp. But really, when it comes down to it, it's never going to be commercially viable until federal scheduling changes. So just like the folks who are suffering in the medical community, people who are also saying that this should be commercially available for everyone, there's also the industrial hemp community, and it's being locked out. And there's so many environmental benefits. We can be using it for paper, we can be using it for fuel, and there'll be more of that at the Hempfest, and I think my time is up. So I'm just gonna, I'm available for if anyone wants to talk to me afterwards further. But I think it's important people remember that the drug war is not over, and yeah, moderator's here. The drug war is not over, and people out west really have a much better situation than people back east right now. And I'm so happy to be here. This is my 8th year attending Hempfest. It's the best Hempfest in the world. I think it's a great place for the global cannabis community to come together, and I hope you guys keep rocking it every year. Thank you.
So now I want to introduce you to Dr. David Bearman. He is able to tell us about all of the incredible life-saving applications of cannabis. I know everybody's heard about it a lot in the last couple weeks with Dr. Gupta's piece on CNN, but Dr. Bearman is here to really provide not just, from a cultural, political, and economic standpoint on how prohibition has come to play, but he's also going to talk to us from a substance abuse and prevention standpoint and explain, that perspective of the conversation.
Hi. Thanks again for putting this on. Thanks for having me. I've got a lot to tell you about. I want to mention that I've been at this for a long time. I'm a 1967 graduate of the UW Medical School. Even though I practice in California, I've got a few acres of land on Bainbridge Island. I'm only growing trees right now. I helped start the third free clinic in the country, the Seattle Open Door Clinic. And I've been involved in drug abuse treatment and prevention in one way, shape, or form for over 45 years. And one of the things that we found, those of us practicing cannabinoid medicine, is that cannabis is an exit drug. We know that the 1999 federally funded Institute of Medicine report debunked the idea that cannabis was a gateway drug. It is not. Coffee, maybe. Tobacco, definitely. Alcohol, definitely. Not cannabis. Now, I want to digress for just a second, because the discussion about the Obama administration bears talking about, particularly from the medical point of view. Because President Obama is a giant hypocrite when it comes to marijuana. One of my patients went to Occidental with him, said he was one of the top dopers on campus. Another one of my patients is from Hawaii, said he and his cousin was two of the top marijuana sellers in Hawaii. But the thing that really bothers me is that President Obama said that he was going to honor science. So what happened? He reappointed as the head of the DEA, Bush as head of the DEA, and even after Professor Lyle Craker at the University of Massachusetts, professor of botany, had a hearing before a DEA administrative law judge who recommended, they don't have the power to say you must, they recommended that the government give him a grow license so he could study marijuana as one would any other botanical medicine. And she turned him down. I do not call that honoring the science or following the science. Also, you may recall that President Obama said that he was going to respect the state laws. Well, he hasn't. And I got a few negative things to say about so-called conservatives like Justice Scalia, who's supposed to be a big supporter of states' rights. The states are supposed to have, by the 9th and 10th Amendment to the Constitution and the 1925 Linder versus U.S. decision, the right to regulate the practice of medicine. So I'm not talking about recreational use of cannabis. I mean, I think that's important, but I'm here to talk about the science. And the states have the constitutional right to regulate the practice of medicine. And in fact, in a case in 2005, a 6-3 decision where Justice Scalia and Justice Kennedy joined the four so-called liberals, they said, oh no, if you grow marijuana in your backyard and smoke it in your living room, that has an effect on interstate commerce. And so they said the federal government, even though they can't regulate the science, though they do, that they can use the Commerce Clause and stretch it beyond all recognition. Dr. Gupta's documentary was mentioned, and he's made a lot of progress, but he has a long way to go. He doesn't understand the history, and he really doesn't understand all the research that's been done. There are about 20,000 studies that have been done on cannabis and cannabinoids. I just want to mention a couple of things that are in the future. I mean, what do we have to look forward to? We need to look forward to additional studies. We can't do those studies because the federal government blocks pretty much all legitimate studies. The only place where we've been able to have some decent science done was down at in California at the California Cannabis Research Center. It was funded with $9 million from the state legislature back in 1999. And about a year and a half ago, they released a summary of the 18 FDA-approved smoke marijuana clinical studies that were done. Many of those studies were reported in peer-reviewed medical journals. Now, I suspect that most of you know that the federal government that says there's no medical use of marijuana has a patent on cannabidiol, which they got in 2004, and the patent is for its medical uses. The federal government has lost pretty much all respect from any thinking person. Anybody who has an IQ that's higher than room temperature has to question where the government is in regards to science and truth. In 1988, you had the DEA's chief administrative law judge, probably not a fan of marijuana, and this was a rescheduling hearing, and he recommended that it be rescheduled. And in his finding of fact, Chief DEA Administrative Law Judge Francis Young said this is one of the safest therapeutic agents known to man. We know that cannabis, for those of you that saw the thing on CNN, it's an anti-seizure medicine. As a matter of fact, the first modern piece of research was done in 1949. And that's why I say Gupta needs to learn a few things. He said it goes back to the 1970s. You know, off by 25 years. Not too bad in this environment. The other thing we need to look at is irritable bowel syndrome, Crohn's disease. There have been some fantastic results that people have had. You've got the federal government screaming about opiates, excessive use of opiates. I wish I had time to talk about that, but the use of cannabis is one of the important things that a doctor can recommend to a patient that they can use that will decrease their reliance on opiates for pain. I want to jump to talking about cancer. There's a wonderful video that I recommend to you called What If Cannabis Cured Cancer? And we have seen over and over again anecdotal reports of patients who have taken cannabis, often in conjunction with conventional treatment, in which their cancer has gone away. Unfortunately, you know, the media, even though media that is trying to be pioneering, sometimes gets intimidated. I was on the Ricky Lake show, and I actually think I was on air for about 15 seconds. You know, you heard your 15 seconds of fame. If you time it, I had 15 seconds. And what they cut out was, I criticized the federal government for blocking research. Cannabis can cure cancer. The federal government is standing in the way of allowing that. It's been a pleasure to be able to talk to you. I want to mention we've got my book. I'd be glad to talk to you about that. We also have a brochure for something called the American Academy of Cannabinoid Medicine, which is a group of responsible physicians who recommend cannabis. The president of our organization is Greg Carter, who's on the faculty here at the University of Washington. I'm sorry I overwent my time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Bearman. It's always great to learn more about the science. So our last speaker today is Dr. Dominic Corva that we're going to have fighting the war on drugs. It's the Center for the Study of Cannabis and Social Policy, and I don't want to take up too much of his time because I want to leave room for question and answer afterwards. So here's Dominic.
Thank you. Hi everyone. My name is Dominic Corva. Kari's introduced me. I also want to mention, of course, my colleagues in this endeavor, Dr. Sunil Agarwal and Dr. Michelle Sexton. Together we form the nucleus of a research action think tank called the Center for the Study of Cannabis and Social Policy. The passage of Washington State's Initiative 502 has created a novel contemporary legal landscape, a geographic experiment in cannabis legalization. The Center for the Study of Cannabis and Social Policy, located in Seattle, Washington, recognizes that policymakers and the public will be watching our experiment not only to see how it plays out, but to learn lessons from which to inform future legalization initiatives and legal cannabis landscapes. The lessons they learn will depend on what kinds of research and public interest questions are asked, how research projects are designed to answer those questions, who collects that data and analyzes it, and finally, who disseminates it to the public at large. This is the politics of knowledge. I'm a social scientist, by the way, in case you couldn't tell. The Center's mission is to study the effects of legal cannabis policy on social landscapes. specifically by understanding cannabis policy as embedded in broader policy landscapes. This means that I-502 is not just about cannabis, it is about society at large, and interacts in specific ways with other kinds of public policy intended to improve social welfare. Cannabis has diverse uses, including but not limited to food, fiber, and medicine, all of which have existing regulatory frameworks that interact with cannabis-specific policy in observable ways. Cannabis is also a diverse economy with environmental and economic practices that can now be regulated through legal frameworks in combination with existing self-regulation in gray and black markets. How cannabis is regulated here in Washington State is going to be of great social significance, establishing an innovative model that will shape how cannabis is regulated in future places and times. Our unique approach to learning from Washington as a geographic experiment is rooted in the observation that the cannabis reform movement, like the laws which have prevented the formalization of knowledge about what kinds of human cannabis relationships are possible, has always been about far more than the plant itself. For many years, social scientists, NGOs, and civil society organizations have been documenting this as part of a mission to understand the harms caused by drug war policy, rather than inherent properties of the drugs themselves. Because of I-502, and because of also medical frameworks with which they're now overlapping, we can now test social policy hypotheses positively by documenting social benefit rather than negatively by documenting harm. For example, we can ask, can cannabis legalization work for a more democratic economy as a broader social goal? Our unique approach is that we ask social questions of a policy terrain that is not new, rather it has a new part, and with which we are concerned for reasons beyond the promotion or demonization of cannabis politics, culture, and economy. The primary methodologies for doing so are A, to produce new research from which lessons about cannabis legalization can be learned, that are about the place of cannabis in society, as well as the place of social values in emerging legal cannabis landscapes. B, to house and help fund affiliate research compatible with the Center's mission statement and unique interdisciplinary approach, and C, to make that research available to policymakers and the public. As a nonprofit research action think tank with professional and social networks that cross political, cultural, economic, and geographic lines in Washington State and beyond, we are in a position to inform landscapes of legalization from the standpoint of how to make the world a better place. I want to add that in 1972, the Schaefer Commission published its report, Marijuana, a Signal of Misunderstanding. And in some ways, we're finally getting back to 1972. I want to read you the concluding paragraph from their document. This was Nixon's appointed commission to study what to do about cannabis and drug policy. Considering the range of social concerns in contemporary America, think foreclosures, unemployment, profoundly undemocratic economies centered in Wall Street, where we're dependent on Wall Street rather than the other way around. Considering the range of social concerns in contemporary America, and do consider them, marijuana does not, in our considered judgment, that would be the Schaefer Commission, rank very high. We would de-emphasize marijuana as a problem. The existing social and legal policy is out of proportion to the individual and social harm, or perceived individual and social harm, engendered by the use of cannabis. And their concluding sentence, which was completely ignored and now we can get back to replace it, we have attempted to design a suitable social policy, which we believe is fair, cautious, and attuned to the social realities of our time. Those realities have changed a great deal in the last 40 years, but I submit to you that we still have a long ways to go. History is not inevitable, and we need to all take action to make sure that that things move forward rather than moving backward as they did after 1972. Thank you very much.
And with that, if we can have all the speakers come over here, so if people have questions, we can have them available for you. Anybody, any questions?
My name is Kazu Motokura, reporter of Kyoto News, Japanese news agency. I have a question to the organizer about the plan of Seattle Police Department. They are planning to hand out Doritos, and I'd like to know what do you think about this way of participation from the police? And I don't know if it's true or not, but some people are saying that Seattle Police Department have decided to cancel this idea of handing out snack. And I just, if you can confirm that or not.
Where's my Doritos?
Gosh, it's interesting. You talk about people who are rotting in prison and dying, and it's the Doritos people care about. So I do not know for sure if they have decided to cancel the Dorito drop due to the news. I did have a lot of people ask me yesterday looking for a negative part of that story. Like, they wanted me to expound on why it's bad that the police are handing out Doritos. And you know, I don't have an answer. It's fantastic that the police are handing out Doritos, and I'll tell you why. I have been arrested for cannabis. I am terrified of police. And the little work that they're doing to make outreach to show that they're not scary, that they're our friends, makes a huge difference as we're ending this war on drugs. And even more important, it's saving us a ton of money, because they're not going to arrest people for breaking the law, because they're doing education to teach us how not to break the law first. How about that for law enforcement? Any other questions?
I want bunions.
Hi, Mercedes with ThcTv magazine. And my question, one of the themes I picked up throughout this press conference was that there's actions we need to be taking, we the people, to help make legalization a reality. And obviously contacting our representatives are one of them. But what other things do you think people should be doing right now to help end federal scheduling?
Does anybody else want to talk about that?
You know, I think that the best way to be effective as an activist is to find a way to do what you love, to do whatever your passion is, and put that passion at the service of the movement. So if you like to write and you're a good writer, you might want to do something like my friend Clint Werner has done and write an amazing book on the therapeutic and medical uses of cannabis. If you are an amazing designer and you like to make puppets, then maybe you want to construct something like the great big giant puppet that we made of Melinda Haig that we took outside of the federal courthouse. If what turns you on is numbers and accounting and spreadsheets, well, you know, there's dozens of activist organizations out there that would love to have some of that kind of skill put at their service. The fact of the matter is that for most people, activism is something you will do in your spare time. So find the thing that turns you on, the way that you really like to spend time, whether it's doing art, whether it's making music, whether it's writing books, whether it's doing accounting, and put that at the service of the movement.
Right on, I think those are great suggestions. The other thing I just want to tell everybody is don't forget that you are a change agent all the time, everywhere you go. If you're standing in line in the grocery store and you've got a November coalition, there is no justice in the war on drugs t-shirt on, or if you're standing in line at the pharmacy at Costco like I was, you might be able to get a dozen people engaged in a freewheeling drug policy reform discussion right there, standing in line. And you can do that when you're checking out at the grocery store. You know, oh man, what's going on? Hey, nothing. Oh wow, let's reform some stuff. You can talk to people anywhere. Don't be afraid to talk to each other. That's how silence equals death. Remember that old thing? It's true. Talk your head off. Talk about positive experiences. Talk about how the drug war is bullshit. Talk about how your friends are in prison. Talk about how they're wasting $60 billion a year, every damn year, for 30 years. Talk about the facts and be a change agent everywhere you go.
I want to pick up on the themes that have already been laid down. A story is important, and Gupta focused on this one girl that had intractable seizures. I have patients that have paraplegia, quadriplegia, various kinds of intractable pain, and if you're willing to put yourself out there, you are the story. The other thing is to get people to look at the science, get them to take it seriously. I get emails every week from students who said, I'm going to do a term paper. They're junior high school, junior college, And I'm going to do it on medical marijuana. And Doc, can you give me some places to look for this information? Send letters to the editor. Make them make sense. Be responsible. Be respectful. And the last thing that I would suggest is be politically active. In the last election, I was so fed up with Obama and so impressed with Dr. Judge Gray, who was the Libertarian candidate for vice president, that I supported the Libertarians. They're right on 25% of the issues and crazy on the other 75%. But I still think that it's worthwhile to get involved in politics, and we've seen that neither the Democrats or the Republicans are responsive to the will of the people. You're the people. You get out there and act as been told before you.
So I want to echo what everybody's been saying so far is look at yourself, obviously, and be the change you want to see in the world. I also want to say that I think it's very important to reach out and engage with people who disagree with you. I think that it's important to understand that people are afraid, and instead of calling them stupid when they are afraid and they're expressing a fear. At the LCB meetings, there were the only African Americans that came to talk were people from those communities who were afraid of what it was going to do to them. Those people should actually, they should be involved in this conversation. They need to be engaged with. We need them on our side. They don't need to be passive groups that are not linked to this policy issue, because it's only about cannabis. It's about social justice. It's about democracy, and I don't mean just voting, but encouraging a more democratic society, and also truly attempting to create a knowledge base that addresses people's fears. And when they're unfounded, there's still fears and they still matter. We need to talk to them. We need to reach out to them. We need to make connections with other social movements, because that's what this is. This is a social movement, right? So that's what I have to say.
So basically, summing all that up, the answer is stop looking for what other people can do and start asking what you can do to solve this problem. We do have more handouts in the back. I want to remind people, if you need more information, there's a lot of it back there, because we're going to have to wrap up very soon. I have time for one more question if somebody has one. Nothing? All right, thank you to all of our speakers for being here, and thank you to members of the media for reporting this important story.